able to mammals are able to thermoregulate themselves and maintain a constant body temperature. Reptiles, on the other hand, cannot do so. So when humans are basking, it's because they are enjoying the feeling of tanning, of getting warm, of being outside, of being in the sun. And there's many reasons for that. And a lot of those are biological functions. Not only does it feel warm, does it feel good, but it also is producing serotonin, which is literally your feel good hormones. So it's designed to make you feel good. Sunlight does that for you. So go outside sometimes. Great, I promise. It also helps with melatonin regulation. This goes for every single animal on the surface of the earth. Melatonin is produced when we visualize blue wavelengths, and I'll get a little bit more in depth into that later. But that helps us as diurnal species be able to fall asleep and keep up a circadian rhythm at night. And nocturnal species use melatonin a little bit differently, and I'll talk about that later. And then also we utilize it as vitamin D synthesis. You might go to the doctor and they'd be like, oh, you should take some more supplements or go outside more often because you're lacking vitamin D. Vitamin D is essential for growth. Vitamin D is essential for your immune system. Um, and that goes the same for reptiles too. Vitamin D is super, super critical. And we'll go a little bit more into depth as we start talking about the processes of how sunlight works with that process specifically. But vitamin D is super important. Uh, Melatonin is also present in helping reptiles maintain their circadian rhythm, and they also utilize the sun being an ectotherm and not being able to produce their own heat and maintain a constant temperature. They are reliant on the temperature that they put themselves in to maintain a consistent temperature. That's called behavioral thermoregulation, and you'll see animals laying out in the sun basking. So that helps with digestion, that helps with all these hosts of other functions. We're going to get more into the nitty gritty now. So, reptiles have a lot of adaptations to help them bask more effectively because they need it for survival. Um, First of all, color changing. There's a lot of species of reptiles that can change color. One, in relation to how melatonin affects their body, it helps stimulate blanching. So overnight, there are species of lizards that melatonin will literally automatically change their coloration. So when it is the daytime, you guys might know that black is a color that absorbs light. So if you go outside and you step on the asphalt, it's going to be hot. It's because energy is being absorbed into that surface. Whereas lighter colors like white, like snow or ice, some of you might have that right now. Snow reflects light, so it doesn't absorb it. That's why it doesn't melt as early as we would hope. So here's a little bit of an example of how a bearded dragon is utilizing this. So you can see in this study, there is a bearded dragon that was kept in an area that has the exact same constant lighting spectrum, so they're able to see the same light. It just the ambient temperature in the area that they were kept was different, and because of that, the animal changed colors to help absorb more energy. So you can see in A, there's this darker individual. It's actually the same individual, but it's putting on this darker coloration because it's colder and it's trying to get as much sunlight as possible to be able to warm itself up better. And vice versa on the other side, he doesn't need very much heat, so he's going to be a nice light color that doesn't need to absorb as much. We also have animals that change their shape. So a lot of lizards will flatten out, sprawl out to help increase their surface area, not only with the sky above them, like this collared lizard is doing, but they also go onto rocks and conducting materials that have absorbed sun's light and is radiating it, is radiating it back into their body from below as well, which is super effective. Um, They also have a lot of eyesight variations from our own eyesight that allow them to understand lighting a little bit better than we can. They're able to see with more light receptors than we can from the parietal eye, which is a little third eye on the very top of their head. I'll show a picture in a second. And they have some other photoreceptors actually in their brain, in their skull, because their skulls are so thin, especially for a lot of our like smaller like gecko species and such. Their skull is so thin that they have photoreceptors inside of their body that doesn't even see the light of day, but it can still get the benefits from that sunlight. So they also have additional cones in their vision. They have we have three. A lot of reptiles will have four, so they can see UV vision as well, which UV is super important, and we'll get more into that. And then they also have another type of receptor called melanopsin, which helps it doesn't capture wavelengths like visually, but it does allow them to sense this certain wavelength just by having this type of cell in their body. So here you can see that parietal eye right on top of the head. It's very, very obvious in most lizards and crocodilians. And here's a little bit of a picture that's kind of a lot to understand, so I cut it down a little bit to what we're interested in. So vision, right? So we're interested in the optic lobe. We're interested in the optic chiasma. These are the things that connect the eyeballs to the brain. Then we're also interested, if you look up in the middle, there's that parietal organ that we were talking about. You can see it's on either side of it is the skull bone. You can kind of see in that picture that we just looked at. It's pretty much exposed to the sun. It is that third eye. And that connects directly to the pituitary body and the pineal body, which help to regulate both hormones and to regulate like your neuroendocrine system. And then if you look right here, I added a couple of things. We added the hypothalamus, which helps with hormone secretion. And I added these ventricles. So you can see there's these empty spaces in the bottom central picture. But there's also two empty spaces further forward that are kind of paired next to each other, forming a C shape. And inside of those is where those receptors are. They're called suprachiasmatic nuclei, and they're a group of cells that help set the clock of the hypothalamus that aids in the circadian rhythm so that these animals can get the light that they need to when it's there. So going on, we have habits is something that is super critical for both nocturnal and diurnal species and crepuscular species, but especially ones that utilize sun basking readily. You'll see that in the morning, they are basking on primarily insulating material. And this goes the same for nocturnal species. They understand that insulating material, such as wood, is going to retain its heat overnight. Whereas you go outside in the morning and you step on a rock or you step on a piece of metal and it's cold. It takes a long time for the heat to absorb into it from the day. So in the morning, they're on insulating materials. And in the afternoons and in the evenings, you'll see animals going out and basking on those rocks like that previous photo and like this photo here. So in the morning, you can see on the left, we have a lizard that's basking on wood, is retaining that temperature overnight. And then in the afternoon, you'll see a snake on the asphalt, which takes in the sun over the day and retains heat as it into the night until it dissipates overnight. So a really good time to go and look for snakes or lizards if you're interested is at night on the side of roads. It's called road cruising, and it's a really fun way to get an idea of what kind of animals exist in your area. So, getting a little bit more in depth, how does sun work? What does the sun produce that is so good for the body that makes all these animals want to utilize it, us included. So the sun produces energy. So here you can see this is a spectra of wavelength. So way at the end on the far left, we have our gamma rays. And then our X-rays, these are very, very uh, short wavelengths. They can be detrimental, they can be dangerous. That's why your doctors cover you up and hide behind the corner when they put on X-rays. Then we get to UV light, visible light, infrared light, and then our longer wavelengths that are a little bit safer, like radio waves that we readily use to communicate. The ones that we're concerned with today, though, are ultraviolet, visible, and infrared. That is what the sun produces and is uh, utilized in our atmosphere readily. So here's a bit more on that. This is a solar energy distribution. So you can see way down at 250 nanometers, that's where we start being concerned with the entrance of the sunlight curve into our atmosphere. You can see this curve reaches all the way up past 300,000 nanometers, which is past our infrared. And this nice pale yellow color is everything that's filtered out by gases in the air. So we get this kind of like sharp peaked black line that you can see highlighted here in this like red, yellow, colorful spectra that we get to see and visualize and utilize for our own body. So what we're, sorry, wrong button. What we're considering now is going to be how these things affect the body specifically. We have the ultraviolet radiation, which starts with these really, really, we have infrared, visible, and ultraviolet. Infrared is our very long wavelength. That's what's providing our warmth. Our visible is what we can actually see, us as humans. So that's how we are able to visualize it better. And then we have our ultraviolet, which we can't physically see, but other animals can. And we'll talk about that in just a second. But first, I'm going to take a quick pause because that was a lot of information. The most important things that you guys need to know is that the sun produces energy, and that energy is free energy for us to use and animals to use. And we have all adapted and evolved to be able to utilize that energy the best that we can. So we're going to be talking about how these animals can utilize it within their body functions. So that's the most important thing to understand. Wavelengths can get a little bit iffy if you're not into physics. But I just wanted to open it up if there's any questions on any of that conceptual stuff before we move on to the more biological and ecological stuff. I'm open for a couple minutes here.
Okay, so for our first question from Facebook is, what is psychotechnology?
Sorry, what?
It says, what is psychotechnology?
What is psychotechnology?
Like PS?
That's what she said she did. What she said her job was her title.
Oh, my job. Okay, histotechnology. Sorry. You're good, you're good. It's a weird field. It's really niche, and I'll actually show a slide and talk a little bit more on what histo is in a second here. But histology is the study of tissues. It's the study of how our organs interact with one another. So currently I'm working at a veterinary diagnostic lab, and I am I am creating microscope slides so we can understand how diseases are functioning in these body tissues.
What advice do you have for current U46 students who wants to pursue a career in science? From Facebook.
Okay. If you want to pursue a career in science, I highly recommend reading. That is the most important thing you can do in regards to science because things are constantly changing. The kind of information that I'm figuring out now and like presenting to you guys now has changed so much in the last 10 years, and continues to need more research. So if you're interested in science, if you're interested in researching, definitely just keep reading, keep figuring out, and keep being interested and curious, because that's really what science is. So.
From Genoa Elementary School, from the 4th grade class asks, how do animals use the power of the sun?
Sweet, yeah. Well, that might actually be a great segue into our next little section. The power of the sun is literally what we're going to be talking about biologically. So I guess we'll just jump into it then, if you guys are ready. Okay. All right. So the power of the sun, these energy photons we were briefly talking about, the energy that the sun provides can do so many things. And we're going to start by talking about those shorter wavelengths, those super powerful wavelengths that the sun provides, called ultraviolet waves. So the ones we're concerned with that the sun produces is UVB and UVA. Everything else is filtered out by the curvature of the Earth and the atmosphere. There are spectra far beyond that, that is utilized in space, but that is not something that we on this planet are evolved to be able to utilize. So first up, on the far end, we have our UVB, which only makes up about 0.5% of that solar spectra that I showed you earlier. UVB is super, super small, but it is super, super potent and super powerful, and it does so many things for the body. So even though it's such a small amount, there's so much free energy that these animals can use, and we can use as humans as well. First of all, we have our skin health, which is super important. You might have seen like UV lights being used to help disinfect things in the medical field. That's what UV light does on your skin as well. It helps prevent bacterial growth. It helps increase lymphocyte and melanocyte production, which lymphocytes are your immune cells. They're your white blood cells that help kill diseases that enter your body. Melanocytes are melanin pigments, which help tan the body. So if you go out sunbathing and you get a tan, then you're producing melanin utilizing melanocytes. And that actually helps protect against other wavelengths. So it helps keep your skin safe and it helps protect you. Also, beta endorphin release. So UVB produces beta endorphin or promotes beta endorphin release in the skin. And that's associated in our bodies as humans with hunger, pain, reward cognition. So it's utilized to reduce stress. It's utilized to maintain the body's homeostasis and maintain like a base level of calm, which is excellent. That's something we all want to strive for. And then I already talked about that, the bacterial reduction, the microorganism reduction, that disinfecting property that UVB has. But a little bit deeper, we have this vitamin D synthesis, which is something that if you are interested in reptiles at all, you have probably heard about before. First of all, there's calcium metabolism. So that is what in the reptile system you often hear as metabolic bone disease, but it is something that is present in all animals that utilize vitamin D. Vitamin D has many functions within the body, but one of the most well-known is calcium metabolism and like your ability to use calcium from your gut, from your diet in your bones and in your muscles. So without proper vitamin D, your body starts attacking your bones to utilize those functions, to utilize that calcium from your bones because it's not getting enough from the diet to utilize your bone mass in your body where it's needed. But in return, you get weak bones, and in MBD ridden animals, you get bones that are super brittle, like osteoporosis, that just break constantly and they can't heal because there's not enough calcium in the body. There's also organ function that once you have enough vitamin D to be able to metabolize calcium appropriately, there are so many other things that the organs that you can utilize vitamin D, such as your kidneys, um, your kidneys, your lungs, your heart, your brain. Everything utilizes vitamin D and some other precursors to vitamin D as both a vitamin and as a hormone. So here's a little bit more in depth of how that specifically works. So we start with our UVB. You can see this frog's skin has on it these, sorry, I'm looking at my notes really quick. There's some long words that I am very bad at pronouncing. So you have a type of cholesterol on your skin called 7-dehydrocholesterol, and the UVBs only function in promoting this cycle is turning that into pro-vitamin D3. Then your body does the rest. Your body turns pro-vitamin D3 into pre-vitamin D3. It turns, if there is at all any warmth in the body, so obviously an animal needs to be basking, which goes a little bit more into our infrared spectrum. But if there's any warmth in the animal, then they're able to automatically change that pre-vitamin D3 into D3. So it's called 25-hydroxy vitamin D, and it also can produce in the liver a hormone called 1,25-hydroxy D3. But I'm just going to refer to them to make it a little bit easier on the tongue as vitamin D3 and the hormone part of vitamin D3. So when vitamin D is transported from the liver to the kidney, that's where that calcium metabolism takes place. It's needed daily, so you can't go a day without having D3 added to your diet. So you can get that from eggs, you can get that from the sun. Then you are able to utilize that calcium from the gut in muscle function and growth and reproduction. And your parathyroid hormone tells the body that that function is happening appropriately, so that your phosphorus and calcium levels are remaining appropriate and not being taken from your bones. But if there is excess vitamin D3 and pre-vitamin D3 in the body, then it can be used elsewhere. So that's where we get our ability to use, so like outside of the endocrine system, which is all in relation to the kidney. So everything blood related is related to your kidney, is related to your endocrine system. But if it is transformed, if pre-vitamin D3 is transformed into D3 and into that hormone outside of the endocrine system, so outside of your blood, if your pancreas does it, it can increase insulin production. If your heart does it, it can increase cardiac function and strength of your heart. It can help with reproduction, with your fertility and your sperm count, with the D3 needed to produce embryos, especially in relation to animals that utilize calcium to make their eggs. There is benefits in having this hormone affect your immune system, which prevents proteins, which when proteins are invading, it allows the body to send out antibodies as opposed to harmful cytokine storms that, when used ineffectively, can be more detrimental to the body itself. It can help with cell division regulation, so it can help prevent cancer by throwing out cells that are being produced ineffectively and mutating. And then it also helps with neural development as animals are growing, especially embryos. lack of calcium and lack of vitamin D can, like from the mother species, can it has been proven in many studies to show the muscle development is just not there to be able to give the animal strength to break out of the egg, to break out of the shell, to survive on its own. So UVB is super, super critical. It does so many functions, so many health functions, so many immune functions, that being outside and utilizing that is so, so important, because if you were to just only get vitamin D from your from ingesting it from your diet, you only have that endocrine function available to you. You can only utilize that function that goes from the liver to the kidney to prevent your bones from eating themselves. If you are outside, then your body can have that transformation happen anywhere in it, any cell in that body. And that production from pre-vitamin D3 to vitamin D3 toward that hormone is what is that important factor that allows those other organs to use that for their own purposes. So super, super important. That's like the big one. Everything's going to be slightly less intense from here on out, but UVB is super, super important, even though it only makes up 0.5% of what our sun produces, because it is so such a short and strong wavelength. It does so much for us, and it's amazing. So go outside. Next up is UVA, which is a little bit more interesting in regards to vision, because we can't see it, but animals can, and we can visualize it utilizing some lights. So you'll see in a second that some animals can actually see UVA and have receptors on their body to help utilize that function more readily. As a brief side note, there are like a couple sectors in UVA. There's UVA2, which helps prevent vitamin D3 from becoming oversaturated, because that is a concern. It is a fat-soluble vitamin, so you can technically overdose on it. But if your body is functioning properly, then, and you have access to full spectra, you have this back regulation with this these cholesterols, the tachylesterol and lumesterol, and that in conjunction with UVA2 stops the overproduction of vitamin D. So UVA2 does that function, and UVA1 is kind of where the visible spectra that we're interested in. Nitric oxide is something that is produced, or is something that is produced in excess when UVA is present. And nitrous oxide is known to lower blood pressure and increase your blood flow by increasing the circumference of your veins and your arteries. And that helps your immune function, help your body more. When you can breathe better, when your blood cells can transfer through your body easier, when your oxygen can transfer through your body and your energy can transfer through your body easier, everything is better for you, because you can react a lot more quickly to circumstances. So increased blood flow is good for the most part. And then here's those visual factors that we're talking about in consideration to UVA. We have pheromones. A lot of animals are able to produce pheromones, not just reptiles. There are like species of mice that utilize pheromones to mark their dens so they can find them in the middle of the desert where everything looks the same. They utilize pheromones that are visual using UVA receptors. There are a lot of species of lizards and snakes that utilize pheromones to help find each other during the mating season. And there are visual pheromones if they have UVA receptors. Markings also help these animals form social relations with one another. There are many species of lizards that form social groups and understand one another, and understand who they are based off of what they look like. And these UV markings help determine that a little bit more readily. it does also increase predator-prey relations, not only between reptiles and other sized reptiles that want to eat one another, but there are a lot of bird species that can also see UV, and vice versa. There are birds that are marked with UV that reptiles can see more readily. So it's all cyclical. Everything gets a little bit of give, a little bit of take, and there might be more birds dead by certain species and more lizards dead by other species of birds. So a little bit give, and everything, I don't know, the world goes round. I don't know. Here's an example of one of those UV like irradiant species of gecko. You can see under this light that he has this yellow underneath him and around his eyes that is illuminated with UV. So we don't have UV vision, but this is an approximation of what it would look like if we did. But there are, of course, species that do have UV vision, right? That's why we're talking about this whole thing. So Francis Baines came up with this absolutely beautiful chart that kind of shows our cones and rods. So humans, you can see there's these peaks right here in the blue, the green, and the red. And that's the cones that we have that we're able to utilize a combination of to see the colors that we can see now. Other species have other receptors. So geckos, these are nocturnal species, have these UVA. I don't know if you can see my mouse, but there's a peak right on this UVA spectrum on that retinal threshold. And as well with this turtle and the garter snake and the boa, they all have visualization in that UVA, which not only helps them determine basking sites because they're able to see like where there is more radiation, but it also helps them see better at night, and it helps them see each other, especially if they have markings that allow them to do so. Obviously, certain species utilize like visible light, which we'll go into a little bit more next, differently. So you'll see this boa constrictor on that top right corner only has two cones, that UV cone and a green cone. And that's because that's a nocturnal species that is awake mostly at night, as opposed to these geckos that are crepuscular, which means they're awake mostly at dawn and dusk when this blue wavelength is super, super prominent. So we'll go into the visible spectrum next to help explain that a little bit further. So the visual spectrum goes from 400 nanometers all the way up to 700 nanometers for humans. That's what we can see. 700 nanometers is our longer wavelength. So that's where we're getting up towards our infrared. 400 nanometers is shorter. That's towards our ultraviolet. So violet, red, ultraviolet, infrared, you know what I'm talking about. So warmer colors are closer to that wavelength, which helps us understand a little bit about how sunrise and sunset works. So as the curvature of the Earth, there is a passage of, there's like this, the Earth is round, right? And surrounding the Earth is our atmosphere. The sun has to pass through the atmosphere to reach whichever point you're at. So at high noon, the sun is directly above you. That's the shortest distance that sun has to reach to get to you. And that's when you'll see the brightest colors. That's when you'll see that the majority of the shortest wavelengths. So our ultraviolet and our 400, 500, that's why the sky looks blue, right? The sunrise, sunset is when the atmosphere filters out all of those other colors because it's such a long distance to get through that atmosphere as it's curving around as the sun is continuing to disappear around the horizon of that sun, or of the Earth, sorry. So when animals see these different colors, they get different meanings out of them to be able to utilize their circadian rhythm and know when to bask, when it's too hot, when UV is too intense that could burn them, that could be detrimental to them. When is sunset? When are they able to, when is sunset? When is prime hunting time for crepuscular species and honestly most species? And basking zones are determined by that visualization. So how have they evolved and adapted to respond to some of those higher intensity wavelengths? So we're going to go back to this picture here. So we can see that those purple and the red are lower on the spectra than that blue. Again, at high noon, that short, our blue sky, that short distance, that's what the sun is producing the most of, is that bright blue color, right around 450 to 500 nanometers. And there's something special that reptiles have, and we have too, called a melanopsin cell. So I'm going to overlay that really quickly. You can see it's similar to our cones where it can see certain parts of the wavelengths, but this is not visual. This is a cell in your body like any other cell. And this is what helps produce melatonin in your body. So that's why blue is super, super important for understanding how melatonin works within your body. So, oh, sorry, hold on. I had one more point I wanted to make on that really, really quick. I wanted to speak quickly on nocturnal species. I know I mentioned earlier at the beginning of this talk that nocturnal species and diurnal species both have this blue color as a cue for them to understand or to start producing melatonin. So melatonin is produced at the same time for every species that is in that region. Melatonin is not just used for sleep. I don't know if any of you take melatonin to help as a sleep aid for humans, but in nocturnal species, melatonin is actually used to increase activity in the body. So it serves many different functions, and this melopsin cell is able to use that pineal gland that we talked about way back at the beginning when we were talking about vision and the different receptors that, like the light receptors that these animals had. It uses like those hormones to help stimulate that melatonin concentration. And as that melatonin concentration increases over like day length, so the longer the day is, there's more of that melatonin. These animals aren't able to understand seasons, basically because of their internal rhythm. And longer days, longer seasons, that helps them understand when is the right time to breed, when is going to be the best reproductive success for their species evolution. So it's a very, very intense concept, but it is very important to understand how not only we perceive light and we utilize melatonin, but other species that use this light in different ways that we do, and melatonin in different ways that we do, how they can be affected beneficially. So we're going to go into infrared really quickly. I know we're kind of nearing the end, so I want to make sure I can have some time for questions. But we're going to talk about infrared A and really quickly delve into those further away, infrared B and C. So infrared A is the most critical thing for producing warmth. That is energy that we can feel. If you go outside and you feel the warmth of the sun, that is infrared A. It is very high in production from the sun. It takes up 41% of that spectra that we were looking at earlier, that solar spectra. Infrared A is massive, and part of that is it has a lot longer wavelength. So that's infrared is what you're going to see over the longest period of the day. It is providing a huge amount of benefits for a long period of time, all the way from dusk until dawn. Whereas UV, you're only seeing like in the midday range, effectively. So infrared A is warmth, is heat. It is what is crucial for your body to feel warmth and feel energized. The depth of the warmth in infrared A is really important in regards to how other parts of infrared are not able to do the same job that infrared A can. Infrared A can penetrate all the way through the skin to the blood vessels. So any benefits that it's providing is being circulated around the entire body. It increases that vasodilation and blood flow just like our UVA does. So again, more health benefits of having your body more connected to one another, being able to supply needed systems throughout the body on a moment's notice, right? It also increases the usage of cytochrome C oxidase, which most of you probably don't know what that is, but who knows what mitochondria is, or who has heard that mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell, right? In every single cell, yep, there's one. In every single cell, mitochondria produces ATP, or energy. So it uses parts of your body, parts of what you're bringing in, like water and oxygen, to produce more energy, more free energy for other parts of your cells to use in making proteins and enzymes, anything that you need to function in order for your body to like do digestion, do growth, really crucial elementary stuff, right? Mitochondria produces that energy to make that happen. Infrared A increases your ability to make more energy. So with being out in the sun and feeling that warmth and letting it reach all the way to your bloodstream and allowing that mitochondria to be able to produce more energy and spread it around your bloodstream even faster with that increased vasodilation, you have a really, really effective way of warming up, being energized, and you'll see in reptiles especially, that's how they're able to utilize digestion and metabolism. Animals will bask out in the sun for long periods of time because they need to be able to have these functions be throughout their entire body. Because they can't produce that warmth themselves, they need the sun to do it. And infrared A is what does that function. And then infrared A is also something that is visual to these species too, through heat pits in snakes specifically. They have these holes along the sides of their faces that can help them sense prey items and can also help them sense infrared. So heat, it's kind of like a heat vision goggles. If you've ever seen those like spectra where it's like, oh, the warmer stuff is red and the colder stuff is blue, they're able to see where things are warmer and be able to choose basking zones based off of that, because the warmth is what is helping them benefit and helping them gain some of those other benefits that sunlight provides, such as UV, while they're there. And then infrared A also, the way that it exchanges energy with the environment allows it to be utilized over long periods of time. So when the sun is down, it's not producing infrared A that we can use anymore. But the environment is uptaking infrared A the entire time the sun is up. And that's why when you touch that rock in the morning, it's cold, but you touch it at night and it's hot. It's being used as a conductor. So it's changing those infrared A wavelengths into infrared C that is conducted and you can use as an ambient heater to maintain like a constant temperature. So here is a little bit where I was mentioning what histo is about. We're making slides, we're allowing us to visualize how these tissues work with one another. So this is a slide of the skin and it shows how different wavelengths are able to penetrate into the skin. So you can see way up at that top, that purple and red area, that's the epidermis. That's the very, very top layer of your skin. There's not much going on there. It's just like a protective barrier keeping everything else in, right? And then go further down, you see this like darker orangey area, that's your dermis. And then further down, you have your hypodermis, where some of your fat cells are. But right along that border, there's these nice large holes, and those are your blood vessels. Those are what's helping transfer these benefits around your entire body. So you can see, if we go back to like our knowledge of wavelengths, we know UVB and UVA is these short wavelengths that are under 400 nanometers. They are only able to reach the surface of the skin, which we knew. They're providing benefits to the surface of the skin. The body transports it elsewhere, right? Visual light is actually able to penetrate into the skin a little bit as well. But the strongest nanometers that are able to penetrate all the way down again to that blood area is IRA, or infrared A. Way up here from about 800 to 100,000, they're able to penetrate, and that's all within that IRA spectra. Everything past that is not only not able to be transferred through, but some of it is actually blocked by the structure of our skin. Our skin is made of keratin, and IRC cannot pass through keratin. So you might touch something and it will feel warm to you, but it is not doing any of the functions inside of your body that warmth can do, true warmth like IRA can do. So we're gonna skip past this a little bit. This is how that mitochondria making energy works. We kind of talked about that already, but this is just a little bit more in depth for those of you that are scientifically minded. Here's a little bit of a picture of showing those heat pits on the side of the mouth. This is a green tree python, and they have heat pits on the top and bottom of their mouth, which is kind of cool. A lot of species only have it on the bottom. And we're going to go quickly through IRB and IRC, because again, they can't penetrate very far into the body. They are a lot lower energy. Infrared B can still maintain directionality produced from the sun, so it can still produce downward heat and a little bit of warmth, but it can't go that far into your skin. It can't provide that good benefits that infrared A can. It also makes up a lot less of the spectra. So then infrared C is something that is not even seen in the spectra, but because the environment takes up infrared A and converts it into infrared C, and your body actually is able to utilize this pattern that blocks keratin to absorb infrared A into the body, and it gets changed into infrared C just like it does in the environment. And it acts kind of like a greenhouse gas where it can come in, but it can't get out very easily. And that's where it's converted into energy for the rest of your body. So since keratin is a blocker, it actually acts as a protective barrier that's continuing to provide warmth within your body for the period of time shortly after you've been in the sun, right? And so, quickly to finish up, I know there was a lot of information, and a lot of it might not seem super critical, but it is important, not only for your own health. If that's the only thing you take away today, like, I need to go outside more, do it, great. But it also has a lot of implications in the field that I'm interested in particularly. Herpetoculturally, so for your pets, for my animals, understanding how light works is your capacity to be able to provide them with a spectra that is as close to natural as possible. And that helps all of their bodily functions, as we just talked about. You can provide a single light bulb and they're able to have a somewhat of a circadian rhythm. They know when lights are on and when lights are off. But having UVB, having infrared, having a full spectrum of visual light is something that helps provide so many other health benefits to them that it is super important to make sure that we're taking that into consideration. And so many companies are doing the same thing too in the herpetocultural field, which is basically people that own reptiles, right? So there's so many people that are using that to make our technology better and increase our understanding of infrared, not only for us and our pets, but in the medical field as well. We've been using UVB to help disinfect things, especially during COVID. I don't know if you remember, people were using UVB constantly to help disinfect things. But infrared has also been now studied to help with wound healing. You can use high intensity infrared to help heal your body, heal subcutaneous wounds. So that's super important. In the veterinary field, that's something that it needs to continue with research, because we understand that these light factors are important, but a lot of times they aren't implemented in treatment plans. In the wild, animals will go out because they feel ill and will go into the sun, and they'll take on a more risky position because they know the sun benefits them. If they're feeling bad, it will make them feel better. Even if it puts them in the way of predators, it's going to help them feel better. And it's super important to helping them feel better. And ecologically, we need to help understand how, as our world is changing around us due to invasive species like trees and brush that weren't there before, blocking out the canopy is changing the way that our animals interact with them in the wild. And that's what I'm mainly interested in going forward from here, and what I want to continue to do my master's degree in. So I hope that was not too dense for everybody. I am so open to answering questions. I know it's right about 3 o'clock now for you guys. So if you have to go, don't feel bad. I have provided my email. You can definitely email me any questions. Also, be sure to check out the research of these people listed below. I cited them in some of my slides. Francis Baines does great work with UVB. Gary Ferguson, same thing with the whole UV index. Thomas Griffiths and Roma Murin help us understand how infrared works on a great basis. So, all right, I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. So if you need my email, there you go. And if you can stay for questions, I am here. So
Anonymous attendee asked, your presentation has me thinking about seasonal affective disorder. Is vitamin D related to that disorder?
yes, definitely. So we kind of mentioned briefly that vitamin D helps reduce those beta endorphins and serotonin. If your body is lacking those things, it can't feel happiness. So if you don't go outside in the middle of winter, which can be difficult, then you're lacking those things. There also tends to be a lot more cloud cover, which helps filter out some of our sun rays, which is detrimental to us, because even if we do go outside, we're not getting as much high intensity light as we would during the summer.
All right, John Devine asked if UV protection in sunglasses is recommended by eye doctors. And can you explain the damaging features of sunlight to us and other animals?
Yeah. So I know I talked about all the benefits of sun because it is super important. I feel like a lot of people aren't going outside super often, and there's a lot of things that we don't understand about how animals utilize the sun readily. But sun can be detrimental as well. In You can obviously get sunburns, which are caused by UV radiation. Excess UV can cause cancer cells in the form of like melanomas. So making sure that you're wearing sunscreen and protecting your body from excess UV is super important. But that's where, kind of going into how the beginning of the talk I mentioned utilizing time periods to understand how like the basking of certain animals in the early morning, at night, as opposed to right in the middle of the day, can help understand how we can avoid those super high intensity middle of the day moments that can be detrimental to our bodies more so. I don't know if that was a good answer, but I'm going with it.
Okay, Do sunlight lamps actually help with vitamin D during the cloudy months?
Yeah, so if you're getting good lamps, then they definitely can. To provide a great spectra is something we still can't attain, but there's a lot of research, especially for people that keep reptiles and birds in enclosures, that can help provide UV. It's not going to be at the intensity that you can get outside by far, but it is something that can help for sure. And it helps provide those essential functions at the base level.
Okay, so we just want to tell everyone else watching and just want to inform them that Hadley is an alumni of Elgin High School and that she worked on the National Biodiversity Teach-in while she was a student here. And I want to ask you how it went when you were doing this all, as it was like, I guess, less experience than how it is now, and how it all go.
Yeah, when I did the National Biodiversity Teach-in, it was kind of in its infancy. Um, it was, I think, a couple years at like 1 or 2 years after it started. So we were doing a lot of footwork trying to get people to understand like how the system worked and reach out to different classrooms around the world and reach out to speakers that we think would help uh, be interested in like a multitude of topics, which I'm sure you guys also have a lot of experience doing as well. There's just like a little bit more groundwork there for you. So I hope that you had a wonderful experience helping create this for you.
How do you feel on continuing this MBTI program?
I think that I will continue to do it for sure. It's something that is super important because helping people understand about biodiversity and understand about how everything is interconnected and we all benefit from uh, increasing the amount of biodiversity in our natural world uh, is critical during this time of change where there is environmental stressors and urbanization happening constantly. So understanding how important it is to still go outside and be present and understand the importance and the intricacies of these ecological functions is awesome. And having so many great speakers at NBTI can talk about all the different ways that you can get outside and ways that you can understand our natural world is amazing. So.
We also want to thank Hadley's dad, Mr. Copeland, for his support of MBTI even before his children were enrolled in the program. So thank you, Mr. Hadley, for that.
Mr. Hadley.
Mr. Copeland, Mr. Copeland.
You got it. You got it. Thanks, Dad.
Okay.
All right, so we just, so as we're like running out of time right now, we want to thank Hadley for coming in and talk about everything with the MBTI 2024 and being our last presenter of the day. And we want to thank you for taking the time out of your day to do this. And thank you for the presentation.
All right.
Thank you.
Yeah. Have a great one, everybody.